Okay, this will be part 2 for chapter 24. We have a new location, which is whatever. So which of the following has occurred? Okay, we talked about that already. Just factor prices adjust to close output gaps. So one advantage of using expansionary fiscal policy rather than relying on automatic adjustment to recover from a recessionary gap is that. So when we have a recessionary gap, we talked about sticky wages, which means the recovery is going to be more slow. So governments intervening will make it quicker. So their recovery is likely to be more rapid. If real GDP is less than potential, so if real GDP is less than, if we're producing less than we can, then we're in a recession. So we have a recessionary gap. Opposite, if we're producing more than we can, then we're in an inflationary gap. So experiencing a recessionary gap. Which of the following will occur as part of the automatic adjustment process in the economy with inflationary gap? So, inflationary gap looks like this, right? Potential output, price level, GDP. This is our short run equilibrium, which is greater. That's why we're in an inflationary gap. So in the long run, what's going to happen is, unless the government does something, it's our AS curve that's going to shift. Our AS curve is going to shift to bring us to long run equilibrium. So, as we just talked about, factor prices are adjusting. So in an inflationary gap, the economy's booming, everyone wants raises, so wages are going to rise, and that means that the economy will produce less at a given price level because they're going to have to pay everyone more to produce. So our AS curve is going to shift to AS2, or shift left, and that's because of rising wages. This, I've already gone over the formula in a previous video. Just plug in all the numbers and you have to compare them. It's kind of arduous, and I just clicked random one because I'm lazy, but you just got to click through them all and find it out. And when it talks about which the following will produce the largest fluctuations, so the one with the largest multiplier will have the largest change from any shocks to aggregate expenditure. Suppose the economy is initially in long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. A shock then hits the economy. So unless it says so, when a shock hits the economy, we're always talking about aggregate demand, not supply. We're talking about aggregate demand. So now we just have to find out which way it's shifting. And it says the unemployment rate decreases and the price level increases. So the unemployment rate decreases. So this is our initial at potential, AD, and AS. And we want to know which way AD shifts. So without even knowing anything else, it says the price level increases. Price level increases. So let's try shifting it both ways, and we'll see what happens. So here's one way, and here is the other way. Looking at our short-run equilibria, which one has a higher price level? It's quite obviously the increase. The increase in aggregate demand gives us a higher price level. So it's this one here, aggregate demand. It's bad A, but whatever. So we know that price level increased. Unemployment rate decreases because the economy's booming, right? That's why. And what's gonna happen if we read off the graph? It's a little bit in this one, but it is a little bit greater than our potential output. So that means it is an inflationary gap. An inflationary gap in that case. All right, next. Okay. Following the negative AD shock, the adjustment process, blah, blah, blah. The other thing, unless government intervenes, it's always AS that adjusts in the long run. It's always AS that adjusts in the long run. So what happens here? We have a decrease in AD. So let's draw that. Decrease in AD. I'll try to make this nice and big for you guys. Oh, that was bad. There we go. Price level, GDP, AD. So this is our long run equilibrium, right? Decrease in AD, like this, AD2. That's what they've given us. So this is our short run equilibrium. What happens in the long run if the government doesn't intervene is its aggregate supply that shifts to bring us back. So this gives us the concept of the neutrality of money. So we'll talk about this more in chapter 27, but basically it doesn't matter what shifts, because in the end we're just going to end up at the same equilibrium with a different price level. So in this example, because we had a recessionary gap, when we come back we're at a lower price level in that case. So reading off the graph, AS would have to shift to point E, which would be at a price level of 60, and the same GDP, the same at potential GDP of 1,000. Next, reading off the graph, super simple. Look, it's to the left side of potential output, so it's recession, and it's a difference of 100. Next. If the economy is currently producing at output Y0, and the government initiates an expansionary fiscal policy adequate to close the output gap, the result is intended to be. So remember, it's aggregate supply that's always shifting unless the government intervenes. In that case, it would be aggregate demand that would shift. Aggregate demand would shift. So the goal here is to bring this back to equilibrium, and what that's going to look like is aggregate demand will have to increase to go through point B, because it has to intersect the AS curve and potential output to be in long run equilibrium. So the AD curve will shift to the right until point B is reached. And last one, we talked about this already, tax being an automatic stabilizer. So if we reduce it, or if we permanently get rid of it, then the automatic stabilizer is reduced and the economy becomes more unstable.